Alright, so this is the last video in this series, and I just want to cover the difference between composition and options API. So far, we used these methods where we extracted them from this use i18 function from the package. And this is how the documentation recommends if we are using a composition API. However, if you just read the documentation and go through these essentials, you notice in these examples, they use a different approach or different methods. And that is basically using the global scope of this plugin. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to delete everything and show you the options API approach, which will work in our application, even though we use a script setup. So if I delete everything here, and then I will keep this part where we change the language, but I will delete these custom components, and I will bring back this greet message. Now this, of course, will give us an error because this T doesn't exist. But if we take a look at our main.js, we are using this i18 variable and telling our Vue.js to use it as a plugin. This becomes available to our Vue.js as a global variable, which means in our app component, if I just console.log that i18 with a $sign, we should be able to see the whole object in the console. Let's go back to our website, and we have errors, but doesn't matter. If we open the console and ignore these warnings and errors, you notice we have an object here, and within the object we have available locales, fallback locales, and the locale itself. Now notice what happens when we set the legacy to true, or basically we just comment this out. Now back to our website, reload. Notice now we have the object with all these properties and functions. We have the same available locales. We have this D function. We have date time, N for number, T for translations, and so on. So all of these are available to us globally. And even if we set the legacy to false, we would be still able to use all those variables. And so if we go back to our app component, and instead of this T right here, we say $T, just change all of this to $T. And for the time being, I'm going to comment out this select element. So we only have 3 elements where we are showing the translations using this T method, which is a global method now. Notice we don't have any errors, and we can see the text here. And if we change the language of our website, we will see the translations. Now we can bring back our drop-down menu. All we have to do is to grab these elements. So we have available locales, as you can see here, and the locale itself. And all of these are under this i18 global instance. So let's bring back this select element. And for the V model, instead of saying locale, first grab that i18n package and then .locale, because this is the object. And from the object, we want the locale, which would be this right here. Then in our v4 directive, we want to do the same thing. We want to just copy this part and say go inside the object and then available locales, and the rest is going to be the same. Now back to our website. If we reload, there is no error. Let's close the console and we can simply change the translations. So you can see we don't have to import anything, and we are able to grab our translations or the properties of this i18 package globally using this instance. And of course, this would work for other methods. For example, for date, we can use the $D, pass a new date and say long. Let's also have an example for number with $N and pass a number here and set this to %. It doesn't really matter. So these are just examples. Back to our website, we can see everything is working the same way as before, but now we are just using the global properties and methods that are available to us. Now in the documentation, if we go to the composition API, we can read about the differences and the way we are supposed to use it. And that's what we were doing in the previous videos. We set the legacy to false, and we imported the proper methods and properties from use i18. And there are also some tiny differences in the syntax. For example, in terms of different versions of a word, in the options API, we would pass the key, the number, and then the options. But in composition API, which is this one, we will use the key, the options, and then the number. So I would recommend reading through the documentation in general if you run into any problem. And another section that would be interesting to read is the breaking changes in version 10, which is the one we used in this series. And there is a table here that talks about the differences between the T method as a global method and the T method which we import through that use i18. So you can see there are a few differences here, and you can explore and see if they would impact your application. But I would say if you're building a simple multi-language website, this would be all we need to do. So we just have to create our package, set the default locale, set the fallback locales, create our translations, create our datetime format if we want to, and number format, and also custom modifiers or rules if we had any. And that is about i18n plugin, which allows us to have multi-language Vue application. I hope you enjoyed this series, and I hope you liked it, and thank you all for your support. See you at the next one.